Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jamie and today we are going over everything I read in the month of February. So much going on in February. I started a new job, which is always a big life change. I drove up to Indianapolis in order to get a brand new tattoo. I'll insert a picture if I can figure that out. And I still found time to read, and we have some books to talk about, so that's fun. We're gonna start with The Daughters of Izdihar by Hadir Elsbai. Did not write it down in my phone's over there, so I believe that's her name. This book started so strong, and I wanted to love it so much. And the parts, like the actual concepts and characters, loved it. I really truly did. But there was so much of the world building that put me off or took me out of the story. I don't know, maybe it's not true, but I feel as if I can be a little lenient on world building. I don't care if the world is lacking as long as the characters and the storytelling is strong. But this, something about this just truly made me go, oh, are you sure? Like, you don't want to put in, you don't want to do something different? Like, okay, we'll get into it. The Daughters of Izdihar is the first book of an Egyptian-inspired, we'll get to it, fantasy duology. We follow two main characters, Nahal and Georgina. Both of them are weavers, which is the magic of this fantasy world. It's elemental-based magic. Not everyone is a weaver, but each weaver manipulates one element. So Nahal is a water weaver and Georgina is an earth weaver. And there is a lot of like discussion on whether weaving should be allowed or is a sin or is a gift, a blessing, all of that. Both of them also joined the Daughters of Izdihar, which is a civil rights movement focused on various women's rights, such as the right to vote, body autonomy, reproductive rights, education, all of these things. Nahal is from the upper class, so she experiences oppression very differently than Georgina. And because Nahal is from the upper class, she is able to speak out a lot more without risking her status or her family or money like Georgina is. The way these characters are introduced, I actually really love this. So Nahal gets arranged married to the richest man in the city, and his name is Nico. And neither of them are really happy about this. Nahal says she does not want to get arranged married. Her biggest dream is to be a soldier in the new all-female division of the army. So she wants to go to like the academy that will teach that, but she needs her male guardian's permission. Her father would never sign off on it, and also they don't have enough money to pay for it. So, you know, Nico being her husband means he's her new male guardian. Nico is not happy about this because he is in love with Georgina. So Nahal and him strike a deal. You, Nico, will sign my papers and pay the tuition for me to go to the Soldier Academy, the Weaver Academy. And I will put a clause in our marriage contract that lets you have a legal concubine. And then you can just be with Georgina and we don't have to do anything, right? Georgina will not be Nico's concubine. Not that it's like beneath her, but there are several reasons on why it would be ill-advised. She would be disowned from her family. If they were to ever have children, they would not be legally his. Even if he's like the nicest, sweetest, most amazing man who's in love with her, there's no actual legal rights for her if anything were to happen. So she's like, dude, I love you, but I'm not going to be your concubine. Anyway, that brings these two women together. They both join the Daughters of Izdihar and they both fight for women's rights, with Malik, who is the leader of this civil rights movement. And she's a bit incendiary. There's a lot of other things going on that, like I said, there's this conflict about people who believe weaving is a sin, that it's not something that should be practiced. There are obviously misogynists who believe that women should not have the right to vote and should not be their own people, who are fighting, and you know, all of their rallies that start as peaceful protests turn violent and then they get blamed for it. So a lot of things are going on. I kind of loved the like reluctant friendship that Nahal and Nico had due to their arranged marriage, because it wasn't necessarily romantic, but they were still husband and wife. So every so often, Nico would be like, "Don't you dare talk to my wife like that." And I was like, bro, I love that. Like a little friendship, platonic best friend, I don't know. It felt great. Also, Nico was my type of male character. He's, kind of tall and intimidating, but he's very sweet. He's studious. He's not like a fighter. He reads. One of the reasons he and Georgina fell in love is because they had a shared love for history and reading, and I thought that was adorable. So he isn't a big player in the game, but I enjoyed his presence. And I especially love Georgina because she, attacks her struggles in a very relatable way, at least to me. And I loved Nahal's character. A lot of people in the reviews said she was too arrogant, too entitled, very annoying, but I love that about her. I feel as if that was a good choice for her character. It really brought a lot of conflict specifically to her character arc, but also was something for others to push back against. And I like that. When I talk about the world building, I don't know a lot about Egypt or Egyptian history other than like the one Egyptian phase we all go through as kids, right? I know very little about modern day or like even last century of Egyptian history. But I have an understanding of what it kind of looks like, what the culture is, a little bit. I mean, I've never been there, so I don't truly know it, but you know what I mean, right? I feel like a lot of people would have an understanding of Egypt. This story is just Egypt with a different name. When you do like a fantasy inspired by a real country, you are walking this line of making it recognizably inspired by this, but also changing it to be still fantastical. And I don't think this author did that very well. She didn't do much to change it. The country is called Ramsawa, and that's like the only name she made up for this country. This country is flanked by two seas. One of them, at first, she started calling it the White Sea. And I was like, oh, I guess that's the stand in for the Red Sea because it's color, right? No. Later, she's talking about the other sea on the other side of the coast. And she calls it the Vermilion Sea, and then goes on to explain that the White Sea is actually called the White Middle Sea. So instead of making up a cool, new, interesting name, a fantasy name, you call the Red Sea the Vermilion Sea, and the Mediterranean is the White Middle Sea. Like, you couldn't even come up with a different name? I'm picking up on these smaller things. It wasn't super upsetting, but I get to the end of the book and I realize, oh, there were maps at the beginning. I completely forgot about this. So let me go to the beginning of this book and look at these fantasy maps. And I'm going to insert pictures because one of these is Ramsawa and the other countries of this book. And the other one is a screenshot of Google Earth or Google Maps with Egypt. She didn't even change the coastline. And then there's a map of the city Alamaxa and the city Cairo. It's the exact same. I guess I don't understand why she even went out of her way to pretend that this is a different country when she could have just made this like urban fantasy or alternate history Egypt, which I'm sure there are books exactly like that. I guess it's because it's a harder sell, urban fantasy or alt history. Like, just saying fantasy will get cast a wider net, but like urban fantasy won't. Like, a lot of people don't enjoy it. But if she wanted to make this fantasy, why wouldn't she do like 2 minutes of extra work by changing the coastline in the map, or changing the names of the fucking seas so it was less obviously the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. So like she's trying to be both of like, this isn't Egypt, but I'm also not going to go and world build. I posted about this on Threads and some guy replied, and it actually made me really mad because he was like, this is normal. Like J.R.R. Tolkien and George R.R. Martin, they both are, is it J.R.R. Tolkien? Yeah, it is. They both like admit that their stories are based off of English history or like are very English, and that's not the same. That is not the same because yes, they are inspired by like legitimately inspired by the Tudor War, the War of the Roses, I believe, is what A Song of Ice and Fire was inspired by. But those men world build. I'm sorry, I'm giving a man a compliment. Those men world build. Like they built entire histories and countries that don't exist. And yes, there are parallels to history. Obviously, any fantasy is going to have that because it's written by a real life person in taking from real life events. But the actual world building is so different than real world, you know? Like that is the worst person. George R no, J oh my god, what the fuck is his name? Tolkien is the worst person to say he didn't actually world build and the Shire is just England because that man is known for his excessive world building. Sorry, that's a mini rant within this rant. Okay, so we're going to talk about the magic because it kind of goes hand in hand with this world building. I feel as if it is disingenuous to compare any and all elemental magic to Avatar The Last Airbender because it's not their fault that Avatar The Last Airbender is one of the most popular, well-known, and well-constructed elemental magic systems. And, you know, you can only do so much with the elements. So, yes, anyone manipulating water is not going to be exactly like a waterbender. But they're called weavers and only some people have it and it's not really explained why. And then it has the exact same mechanics of all the certain kind of bending, and there's an ancient legendary figure who is able to weave all four elements, and a bit of a spoiler, but a character who is a water weaver eventually starts blood weaving, and everyone reacts the exact same way as they did in the episode of Avatar The Last Airbender, and it is bending, it truly is. And if there was a better built world, I probably would have tried to say it wasn't and say, you know, it's just a simple magic system that's based on the elements. Don't try and compare it to Avatar The Last Airbender. That is disingenuous. They do not have a monopoly on, you know, elemental magic. But the fact that she barely did any effort in the world building makes me not believe that she put any effort into her magic system. Why am I supposed to trust that this isn't just you copying Avatar The Last Airbender when your world building had no creativity, no imagination? You literally took the same exact fucking coastline, turned it 90 degrees, and and it ruined such a good book because it took me out of the story. The entire time I was reading it, I was like, why is this just not Egypt? Or why didn't you, the fucking Vermilion Sea? Oh my god. You couldn't even come up with a different fucking color? I don't understand it. I don't understand why she wouldn't do that. Okay. I mentioned it's a duology. I was like, you know what? I enjoyed the conflict. I enjoyed the characters and their little relationship, their little triad thing that they've got going on. I'm going to attempt to read the second book and see where it leads. And I thought maybe an audiobook would be better because ebooks are my least favorite format and I wanted to listen to it while I was working. And I got about an hour and a half ish in before I gave up. And I just said, I didn't care that much about the conflict in the main story or in the first story. And I'm still angry about the world building. And I don't think there's anything she could do in this series that would make me not be mad at it. Now, I wouldn't be opposed to reading another book by her because obviously people grow. This, I believe, was her debut. So people grow as writers, they do more, they take more risks and more chances. Once you've sold a book, you can be a little bit more more excessive, um, more risky. I didn't care to read the second book. So, also with duologies, I feel almost all of the time they are one story that may have just been a little too long to be one book. So they split it in half, but then being split in half means that they're not full-size books anymore, and so they just pad them with a lot of repetitive like filler scenes, and I don't know, that felt like it happened here. Next, I read I Am Made of Death by Kelly Andrew. Oh my god, I was obsessed with this book. I was on my lunch break out in public kicking my feet and giggling while reading this book, like legitimately in the middle of a restaurant. Like I was obsessed with the romance. The main characters had so much tension, and it was so like I was blushing, like legitimately blushing. And then, upon further reflection, I hate to say it, I think I might have just been ovulating. My mom watches this. Ugh. The let me explain the story. Okay, so we have our main character Vivian. Well, it's two main characters, but Vivian is cursed so that if anyone hears her speak, they go insane and then die. And it's a horrible, gross, horrible death, right? It's like torturous death. And so she has become mute. She has chosen to no longer speak, and she only signs. And obviously, if she signs, she needs an interpreter. So Thomas, who is the child of a deaf mother, so a coda, child of a deaf adult, he obviously knows sign language, so he gets hired on. He's kind of in a desperate position, so even though this is a bit weird, even though there's a few like weird things going on with the parents and the house and all of that, it's a live-in position, by the way. His mother is sick, he needs the money, so he signs on as her ASL interpreter, and then they get into it. She says, I'm gonna make your life a living hell. She's trying to protect him by pushing him away. He falls in love with her. It's beautiful. It's so sexy. And this is a YA, so I'm sorry. I shouldn't be. These are, well, they're 18, but okay, you know what? I'm 26. What? I'm 25, but I'll be 26 this year. It's a bit weird. I loved it. I loved the like aggressiveness, okay, which in a story is okay. But then as I was like reading, and it was a few days later, and I was like finishing up the book, I was like, I don't know if I enjoy this anymore. And that's why I think I was just ovulating, because Thomas, maybe you shouldn't just be punching literally everyone over a girl you met 2 months ago. Maybe your first instinct should not be violence. Now, that is part of Thomas's character, so I do understand where it's coming from, like as a book. But I was like, that's not attractive anymore. Like, I can't believe you would do that. That's so immature. They learn more about this whole like curse and how to break it and all of that, which is where I get to the bad part of this review. I picked this book up because I believed it was a standalone. And it's not my fault. I believed it was a standalone. Nowhere on it did it list that it was part of a series, that it was part of an interconnected standalone series, that it was in the same world as another book. They just literally had the title, the cover, the author's name, and then author of the best-selling novel Your Blood, My Bones, or whatever it is. It didn't say that you needed to read other books to understand this one. It looked like a standalone. So I'm reading it, and they've introduced a few characters named, like, it started with a C, I think. Colton? Colton and Delaney, I think. Yeah, I think it's Colton and Delaney. It's a mystery, so them not being explained, and the fraternity, the paranormal frat called the Priory that they have not being explained, and some of the other things not being explained, it makes sense. It's a mystery, okay? I understand that I'll have a big reveal at the very end. So we're getting closer to the end. And the way these characters and things are written about just tips me off that it's assumed I already knew this. So I go, it says the same author as Your Blood, My Bones. let me go to this summary of that book and see if Colton and Delaney are the main characters. So I go to the summary of that book, and it's not. It's like Wyatt and somebody else. And I go, oh, okay, maybe this is just bad. Okay, maybe I'm stupid. I don't know. But at the very end of that summary, it says in the same world as, I don't fucking know the title anymore. So I go to that book, and that book stars Colton and Delaney. At least that book was required reading for this book because the ending did not make sense. It was completely tied to Colton and Delaney's story. It wasn't like they were cameo characters, it was their story. It was a conclusion to what had been set up in that book. I was so upset because it ruined the story for me. I loved the first half. I loved the writing. I loved the characters. I loved the relationship. I said my piece about how my feelings were tempered, but you know, it was still a very well written relationship and I enjoyed it. And then I was just very confused by the ending, and I'm so pissed that I couldn't have enjoyed this as much as I should have because I didn't know there was required reading. I didn't know this was at least a sequel, if not literally the end of a trilogy, because I don't know how that other book is tied into this. I didn't know what the Priory was. I didn't know why Thomas wasn't affected by some of the things that were going on because that was never explained. I don't know how Thomas even knows Colton. Is he a character in these other books? And I just didn't know? I was so fucking pissed by this. And this is not the author's fault. It's the marketer's fault. It is the publisher, it is the people on the marketing team that made these decisions. You have lost a reader because of that. Because now I'm like, I'm just confused. And if I hadn't gone and looked at the other books, I would have been like, I guess it's just a confusing ending and I'm not going to read anything else by this author because she can't write a fucking book. You are ruining your author's chance at other readership because if I hadn't gone that extra step to look this up, I would have just had a bad review and explained to all of my friends, don't read it, it's fucking confusing. So well written. Like truly so well written, and I enjoyed it so much. And I do want to know those questions that were answered in this book. So maybe my rant doesn't make sense now because I actually will probably go read that other book. But if I hadn't have done that extra step, I just as easily would not have read it. I will warn people because this is an issue for me sometimes. The main character, the main female character, is a ballerina and she's very small, and the guy is very big. He's like 6'5", I guess. I don't know. Which I like. I like a big guy, okay? But because there's a height difference and because the main character is a ballerina, they talk a lot about how she's teensy, how she's swimming in a hoodie, how she barely weighs anything when he picks her up. So I know people can be sensitive to that. I myself have times where I am sensitive to things like that. So be cautious if you decide to pick this up. Next is Once Upon a Time in Dollywood by Ashley Jordan. This is a romance. I read it for book club. This features dual perspectives of Eve, our female main character, and Jamie, our male main character. Yes, another male main character, male love interest named Jamie. Another one I read previously was The Firekeeper's Daughter. And it was weird back then. It's weird now, especially when this has explicit sex scenes. And I was listening to an audiobook and the female audio narrator was moaning the name Jamie, and I was at work. Probably shouldn't be doing that. So Eve lives in New York. She is a playwright, but she has a bit of a crisis, so like a midlife crisis, because she has experienced several miscarriages. She's unhappy in her engagement. So after, dealing with, I think, a third miscarriage, and this is like chapter 1, so keep that in mind. After dealing with like a third miscarriage and breaking off her engagement, she flies to her late grandmother's cabin in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Just lives there for the summer to cool off, reconnect with herself, try and write her new play, and also try and like work through some of the issues she's been having in her life. She meets Jamie. Jamie is going through a bad divorce. His ex-wife cheated on him. They have custody or they're fighting for custody of his 7-year-old son, 8-year-old son, named Jack. And he is from Nashville, but he decides to blow off some steam and going to his vacation cabin in Gatlinburg, which is next to Eve's cabin. And that's how they meet. They have a pretty quick, intimate relationship that then turns into more of a feelings-based relationship. They work through traumas together. There's a third act breakup, and they get back together, and it's happily ever after because it's a romance. This book almost wants to be a combination between a lit fic and a romance. Not that romances cannot be sad or traumatic or dealing with heavy topics, but it pushes so hard into that like uncomfortableness that lit fics tend to go towards, where your characters are very unlikable because they've been through traumatic things, but like they're allowed to be unlikable in a lit fic. It is almost required. She's always the victim. She worked through some horrible things, so I'm not saying that she wasn't a victim, but that was something we talked about in book club, is that she's the victim of everyone else, and she doesn't take accountability for her own faults. I think what happens is at the end we get to a point where both of them are, and this is a big spoiler, but we get to a point where both of them are like, I love you, but I'm not in a place in my life right now to be in a relationship. And then like 2 chapters later, everything's fixed, everything's perfect. They get all of these new opportunities handed to them, and they are able to live their happily ever after. And I feel as if this were a lit fic, we could end on that bittersweet ending and it would be more impactful. If this was like literary fiction, we could end on that right person, wrong time, and then close the book and be, unsettled by this idea that you could find legitimately the right person and, are unable to be with them for extenuating circumstances, and that just sometimes happens. And maybe it's for the better, because even though you had this beautiful summer fling, you had this beautiful person come into your life, that's all they could be. And if it were a lit fic, we could end on that and have a more impactful ending. But no, because this is a romance, and genre romance requires a happily ever after or a happy for now, they have to be together at the end of the book. And I just feel like it weakened the ending because it doesn't make sense. Why is he moving to New York for her? That doesn't make sense. Also, she is a playwright. And I'm not going to act like I know anything about Broadway, but it is my understanding that the playwright doesn't necessarily need to be on set, especially after opening. I can understand like while you're doing the workshops, because you got to see how the stuff happens in the space. All of that could be like a video call, or you could fly in and still live with your handsome, rich, amazing man, in Tennessee. I don't understand why he moved to New York for her when, okay, sorry, that was a big spoiler. The ending does not make sense. And I feel as if it were a lit flick, a lit literary fiction, we could have had stronger ending with that bittersweet, like right person, wrong time. It is a debut. I don't know if I would read another book by her. If it wasn't a romance, I think I would, but I'm not spending my time on romances all the time. The Cautious Traveler's Guide to the Wastelands by Sarah Brooks. I read this on audiobook, coming back from my tattoo appointment, so this was really fun, but I was very exhausted. My fiance, I gave him a list of options for audiobooks to listen to on the road trip, and this was his pick, and then he slept through the entire thing. That's my man. We follow 4 characters. I wrote down 4. I'm trying to think. 4 characters through a multi-week train ride from Beijing to Moscow. I want to say this is set in like the 1920s. Something happened to Siberia, and so it has become this like gross alien mushroom slime, like mutated thing. So it is now the Wastelands. And something about the Wastelands like drives people insane, dangerously crazy. They become a danger to themselves and to others. And so obviously like Beijing and Moscow are like we have fortified ourselves against the wasteland, but people still need to travel. So you can either go the very very long way through like coach coach and car or whatever, or you can go through the wastelands on the one train that travels through it. We follow four characters who are on the train for one reason or another, and batshit crazy stuff happens. And we learn more about the wastelands and why they exist and what people did to do to the wastelands and all of that. And it was so fun. It was so well written. It was so engaging. It's got that moldy horror vibes. It's like human versus nature slash ecology, trying to force the nature, the earth around you to bend to your will, and the earth saying, fuck no, we're not doing that. I love books like that. It felt so much like this one series called Scavenger's Reign. I believe it's an HBO original, but you can also find it on Netflix. It got canceled after the first season, which is horrific because it was so good. It's an animated series about these people who crash landed on an alien planet, and the planet is like connected to each other, and they're just trying to survive in this like creepy, gross, like everything's trying to eat them, but it's like that's just nature, right? And then they find like the life pulse of the planet. It's so good. And it reminded me so much because everything in the wasteland is connected, and the wasteland has influence over the people that are there. It's such a good like read, and the entire time I was reading it I was like, oh, this makes me want to rewatch Scavenger's Reign, but not in like a bad way, because I've said in other things it like reminds me of another piece of media and I would rather be watching or reading that piece of media. That's not what this is. This reminded me how much I loved Scavenger's Reign, and I was like, oh my god, I so much enjoyed this book, I want to watch Scavenger's Reign again. Oh, it was so good. Okay, there were a few side characters I wanted more from, and that's more of a me thing. I think the author balanced her characters really well, but I liked Alexei, who is a friend of one of the main characters, and he plays a big role in her story, but he doesn't have his own perspective chapter, and they don't really do anything with him. So the entire time I was like waiting for Alexei to have more. He's not the story, you know, he was just my favorite character. So more of a me thing. One issue I had was that this was told in a third person omniscient rotating POV, and as an audiobook listener, it was kind of difficult sometimes to remember whose perspective we were in. Might not be an issue with like physical copies. You might have a header that explains it, but with the audiobook, suddenly we'd be in a totally different area and I'd be like, oh, did we switch perspectives? I can't remember. Noor by Nnedi Okorafor. Don't really have much to say about this. Noor follows Ao and DNA. Ao was a disabled child, like she was born with several disabilities, and then later also had a debilitating car wreck that has left her with a lot of augmented limbs. That is seen as bad in this area, and so at the market one day she gets attacked and in self-defense accidentally kills multiple people. So she immediately goes on the run, and she runs into a guy named DNA. I forget what his real name is. I don't think I ever actually caught it, but he goes by DNA. He is a cow herder, and he's from a more traditional rural area. He's also on the run for a perceived crime, and they just go on the run together. There's this like evil capitalist corporation that's pulling strings, and they reveal how bad this corporation is. There's this main theme of like traditional versus futuristic, I guess is the best word, or like new technology, technological, traditional versus technological. And I liked that thread of the story, but I feel like I've seen this story before. It didn't knock my socks off. It was fine. I've read a few things by Nnedi Okorafor. I just never have been blown away by it, other than like the Afrofuturism. That is cool, but the actual story I've never really been that impressed by. So I think maybe I just don't like her writing style. Still willing to read more from her, but I've read 2 of the Binti books. I've read Noor. I feel like there was another one I tried to read and I didn't like it. I don't know. I feel like I don't really enjoy her specific writing style. It almost every time feels like I am missing parts of it. Like I'll be reading it. It feels like I'm missing sentences. I don't really know how to explain it, but I just never really feel like I've fully gotten a story from her. Finally, we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I loved this book. The only 5-star of February? Yeah, the only 5-star of February. Oh my god. Okay, so Noemi is our main character and our only POV character. She gets called to this really old estate in rural Mexico, I think, that is owned by an old family. They owned a silver mine. The silver mine closed down after a few tragedies. The reason she's called to this is because her cousin married into this family. And her cousin sent a very concerning letter. And so she's going to check on her cousin and make sure she's not sick. Well, she is sick, but make sure she's not going to die, see if everything's all right. And very quickly, we learn that there are some things going on with the family and with the house. There's some bad dreams. There's some weird noises. There's like mushrooms growing where mushrooms shouldn't be growing, like on graves and stuff. I'm not gonna spoil it. But the reveal made me sick to my fucking stomach, guys. I this is another like mushroom horror. I feel like I gotta have a whole list, but there's like so much fungi horror recently. I, I don't know why. What Moves the Dead, Graveyard Shift, Mexican Gothic, technically the Cautious Guide, but that's more of like mutated stuff, not really mushrooms, not fungi. That's 3 off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more. I know I've read more recently. Oh my gosh. There was not a single part of this book where I was like, why are we reading this? I feel like so many times horror and mystery will throw like they'll try to throw red herrings into it, and you sit there and you're like, why are we here? I know this isn't part of the story. I know this isn't part of the reveal. What This is a waste of pages. No part of this book was like that. I was in it 100% of the time. Everything led up to the perfect twist reveal. We had so much like atmosphere, everything. I've I loved it so much I have no words for it. Truly. I loved and this is a bit of a spoiler, I loved the friendship between Noemi and Francis and how that formed. I think it was set up really well. So when we got the official payoff, I was so excited. I was rooting for them. And honestly, I was waiting for Francis to be revealed as like a bad guy. I was like, oh my God, I was going to be mad about it, but I was like waiting for it. I was like, I know it's gonna. So the author did a really good job of making me question everything. Or why should I not question Francis when everyone else is this fucked up, you know? So anyway, oh my God, such a good story. I was worried because I did not like The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which is the same author. So I think it was less about the writing style and more I just was not interested in a story like The Daughter of Dr. Moreau because the writing style was amazing here. I was on the edge of my fucking seat the entire time. I cannot recommend this enough. It was amazing. I loved it. No notes. Let's talk about my DNFs because I did unfortunately DNF Ashes of Gold, which is the second book to Wings of Ebony. It's also a duology. I think I said last video that this was the year of duologies, and they are not hitting. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever liked a duology. I'm thinking about that now. I don't know if I have. The reason I DNF'd Ashes of Gold is because I just was bored. I enjoyed Wings of Ebony to an extent, but it wasn't my favorite read of the month, and I said I was hesitantly excited for the where the character would go, and it just that hesitation went out. I think I was lying to myself. I think I didn't actually care. And when I was confronted with another much longer book, I was like, really want to do this, guys. I really don't. Also, Jamal, I hated Jamal. I talked about this in the last video. Jamal was introduced about 3/4 of the way into the book, maybe 2/3 of the way into the book, and he is a love interest for Rue. They call her Jelani in this book a lot more. So her name is Rue Jelani. He was introduced as a love interest for Rue, and I hated him. I thought it was tacked on at the very end. They have like a kiss after a battle, and I'm like, why the fuck should I care about you at all, sir? You don't exist to me, okay? And so then in this book, there's like a fight and then a 6-month time skip where Jamal is taking care of our main character Rue as she's recovering from the things that happened in the fight and afterwards. And so we're told over and over that they have grown closer because he literally took care of her while she was dying, and she loves him for that. And like he's being overprotective, but it's because he loves her so much, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, well, I didn't see that shit, so why should I believe it? And he also annoys the fuck out of me. And also, like, I cannot stand any of this like romantic shit that's going on because it was just so not for me. Did not like it. I think I'm a little too old for it. I would give it to a younger like teen, but it's not that I think the writing was bad or anything. I just couldn't stand the character. I couldn't stand the story. I didn't want to. I think I got like, I don't even know, maybe 150 pages in out of a 400-page book. I couldn't even make it halfway. Sorry, sue me. Sue me, crucify me. And the other book I DNF'd, and this one's a soft DNF, it's called Glory. And the reason this is a soft DNF is because it has such repetitive, like rhythmic, repetitive writing that's intentional. It's not a bad thing. It's like a fable, like a spoken fable. And so I was reading it on ebook, and that was not helpful. So I think an audiobook format would really improve my experience because this seems like something that needs to be read out because of the rhythmic, repetitious fable the writing style. I don't know how to explain it. Watch out. I will be reading it just as an audiobook at some point. So there will be more info coming about Glory. That was all the books that I read in the month of February. I know, amazing reading month, even though I was busy. Hopefully I can read just as many books in March. Okay, bye!